A question as a fan: is it ever awkward when you're in a room with Nas? Because that Ether Takeover beef with y'all wasn't light.
It was disrespectful.
Yeah, it was a time, and it was a moment in time that was a great moment for hip hop. But for us, you know, we really have a good relationship. We laugh. We don't even, that thing is so far past, and I understand why, you know, even today, that thing is, I guess it's 11 years old, maybe longer, and like people still fascinated with it, but it's so far removed. It's so far in the background that it's...
Everything I'm dealing with is based on reality. You know what I'm saying? A lot of dudes out here is not based on reality. So they know that about me. You know what I mean? You could throw a shot at me, you could throw a record at me, but you know, you don't really want to go there.
As a matter of fact, the first beat he really wrote to was a Swiss Beats beat. It was a lot more energy and a lot more hype.
Over 20 years have passed since Nas dropped the explosive track Ether, his fiery answer to Jay-Z's Takeover, both shaking up hip-hop back in 2001. These records are still seen as legendary diss tracks, the peak moment of a rivalry that had been building serious tension since the late 90s. This was not just music, this was pure competition on wax, two giants going head-to-head with their reputations on the line. But here is where things get really interesting. This story is not about the version everyone knows. It is about the original version of Ether that never officially dropped. The version on Stillmatic was actually the second attempt, almost like a whole different track with a new beat and totally different verses. The beat fans recognize today was produced by Ron Browse, and the wild part is it was never even meant for Ether in the first place. The story goes that Nas got that beat randomly through his manager Steve Stout, but at first he was not feeling it at all. He reportedly brushed it off and left it sitting with other unused beats that did not make the album. Hard to believe now, knowing how big the song became. Before that, Nas had picked a completely different beat, reportedly produced by Swizz Beatz, according to rapper and producer Large Professor from Main Source. That early version was said to be faster, louder, and way more aggressive, with sharper lyrics than the version people heard later. Just like the official version, it had 3 verses, but only 2 have ever leaked. The third remains mostly a mystery, except for one reported line mentioning the tragic plane crash that took singer Aaliyah's life, a reference that added even more controversy to an already intense track. The third verse on the album version of Ether was supposed to be Nas going all the way in, like a full lyrical burial of Jay-Z. It was reportedly twice as long as the first 2 verses, way more personal and much more ruthless with the disses.
We're not awkward around each other at all.
I say the great thing about it is it didn't destroy either one of your careers. Like sometimes when
it helped Nas.
No, yeah, it did help him at that time. But for both of you, it's not like, okay, now this guy just destroyed me, because that happens sometimes with beef. But you guys both were successful still after that. You even more so.
Yeah, you heard a lot of careers. That's what she wants to say. You know,
rap is competitive. You know, it's a competitive sport. Each time I went out, I put my career on the line as well. You know, like that.
Interestingly, Jay-Z had done something similar on Takeover, where his third verse was longer and felt like the final blow. Some believe Nas was matching that same structure on purpose, trying to outdo his rival at his own game. But things did not go smoothly behind the scenes. Columbia Records was reportedly not happy with how far Nas pushed the lyrics in the original version. The word is he had to re-record and clean up the vocals multiple times, removing several lines because they were seen as too controversial. After going back and forth, Nas decided to completely scrap that version and rebuild the track from zero, a bold move that changed hip-hop history. Sadly, the original master recordings were reportedly destroyed, which means that first version may never officially surface. The only pieces that survived are the first 2 verses in written form. Those lyrics give a glimpse into how direct and sharp the original concept really was. In the first verse, Nas jumps straight into a response to Jay-Z's opening on Takeover, even matching his flow and rhyme style to make the message hit harder. He challenges Jay's self-image and confidence, flipping his words back at him in a very calculated way. Lines like, "So you call yourself a god?" directly play off Jay's nickname Hav or Jehovah, which references a biblical name. Nas uses this angle to question that image and portray Jay as someone getting carried away by his own hype. The attack was not just about music, it was about respect, status, and who really earned their place. Nas also paints a picture of betrayal, comparing himself to a mentor figure who helped guide someone that later turned against him. Lines like, "I was the shepherd that led you, but you bit the hand that fed you," push that narrative hard, showing how personal this rivalry had become. This also connects to Jay-Z declaring himself King of New York after the notorious B.I.G. passed in 1997, even making "The City Is Mine" to stamp that claim.
First beat that I had that I gave Nas, not for Ether, and Nas, he didn't like the shit. And I was nervous. I thought Nas's career was over.
Nas clearly was not letting that title slide without a response, and the tension between those claims made every bar feel even heavier. Nas made it clear he never really respected Jay-Z's claim to the throne. From his point of view, Jay was not even in that conversation while Biggie was still alive, more like someone standing in the background rather than leading the charge. Then after Biggie passed, Jay stepping up and calling himself the best did not sit right with Nas at all. That exact frustration even shows up later on the official version of Ether. What makes this deeper is that Nas was already competing for that King of New York title while Biggie was still here. On The Message, Nas even dropped the line, "There's one life, one love, so there can only be one king," making it clear he saw himself in that elite spot too. This was not random talk. This was a real battle for respect and legacy. There were even subliminal shots traded between Nas and Biggie around 1996 and 1997. The tension was building towards something major, but everything stopped after Biggie's tragic passing. Nas later reflected on that complicated history in the tribute track "We Will Survive," showing there was rivalry but also respect underneath it all. Throughout these lyrics, Nas keeps going back to teacher and student comparisons. He paints this picture where he was the one setting the blueprint while Jay was watching and learning. Lines like, "You always begging to be a part of my team," and "I was the first to poison your speakers," push the idea that Nas saw himself as an early influence on Jay's style. Whether every claim is true or not, there is real history between them.
When I see things going on as petty, it's just pettiness going on. I wish that, if it's a battle that's going to, turn out to be a great ending, then I'm all for that. But if it's just battling for the sake of you want attention or you want a certain kind of credibility, or if it ain't got no art form to it, it ain't nothing anyway. So
Jay-Z sampled Nas' "The World Is Yours" on Dead Presidents and reportedly reached out for collaborations earlier in his career. That connection makes the rivalry feel even more personal. When Nas fires back with lines like, "So kill that noise that you're preaching," he is clearly answering the closing shots from Jay-Z's Takeover. Every bar feels like a direct response, showing this was not just rap. This was strategy, memory, and pride all clashing at once. At the 2001 Summer Jam, Jay-Z turned the heat all the way up when he performed the first two verses of Takeover live. The moment got even more intense when he put images of Nas and people connected to him up on the big screen, making the whole thing feel personal and calculated. The message felt clear. He was daring Nas to respond, almost like saying, "Stay quiet, or things could get worse." The crowd knew right away this was bigger than music. Then things got even more shocking. In later lines, Jay hinted at personal drama he planned to expose. The biggest rumor was about his alleged relationship with Carmen, who is the mother of Nas's daughter. This was meant to hit on a personal level, similar to the kind of psychological angles Tupac once used in his own famous rap conflicts. Some fans even believe Jay saw how effective those personal attacks were in past rivalries, and decided to use a similar playbook against Nas. The strategy was clear. Make it lyrical, but also make it personal enough to shake your opponent's image. Jay also hinted he might reveal more private situations at a future Summer Jam event. But things moved too fast for that plan. Nas fired back quickly, and public opinion started swinging in his favor, with many fans saying he was winning the battle. That pressure pushed Jay to respond fast with the freestyle Super Ugly, released December 11th, 2001. That response included some of the harshest and most controversial lines of the whole battle. Jay made more claims about his alleged past with Carmen, presenting them in a way meant to embarrass Nas and damage his reputation. There were also references involving other celebrities, adding more drama to an already messy situation. Jay even mentioned Nas' 1998 Bentley Jeep, a car Nas had proudly talked about in his own music, using it as part of the disrespectful storytelling. The goal was clearly shock value, saying things meant to get reactions and headlines. Many listeners felt those lines crossed the line from competition into something much more personal, showing just how far this rivalry had escalated. This was not just about who had the better bars anymore. This had turned into a full public feud with real emotions involved.
You know, it could have happened to me. You know,
heard Prodigy.
and everybody wanted it to happen. Like,
Yep.
they did. It was a time where it was like, please, let this guy go away. So, you know, that's just the nature of rap. Is competitive. And
Jay-Z was also throwing subtle shots about the rumored situation with Carmen in his track and video, Is That Your Chick? Many people saw it as a calculated move meant to embarrass Nas and keep the pressure on him in public. The tension between them was not just in diss tracks anymore, it was showing up everywhere. Nas answered that energy with lines like, "Let me make this clear, Hav, you had my leftovers," making his position loud and direct. He flipped the narrative by saying he had already moved on, and that Jay was dealing with something from his past. When he says, "She told me your little problem of the day when you slept over," he is clearly trying to clown Jay and hit back with personal disrespect of his own. The leftovers line was Nas basically saying Carmen was part of his past and he had already stepped forward in life. According to that angle, Jay was just stepping into old history. Then Nas adds another insult hinting at Jay having personal issues, trying to damage his image the same way Jay tried to damage his. Some fans even felt that part of the exchange went too far into personal territory, since both artists were putting private situations into public conversations. It showed how messy things had become during that era of rap battles. At one point, Nas even reportedly planned a dramatic stunt for Summer Jam 2002. The idea was to hang a prop figure styled to represent Jay-Z while performing Ether, mirroring the kind of stage shock tactics Jay had used before. But the plan never happened because Hot 97 reportedly shut it down. There were also claims that Jay-Z was getting more support from that station during the feud, with Takeover reportedly getting heavier rotation than Ether. That only added more frustration to the situation and made the rivalry feel even more political behind the scenes. Nas wraps this section with more insults similar in tone to what fans heard on the final version of Ether, calling out what he saw as fake behavior and industry acting, keeping that same sharp energy all the way through.
And he uses that beat. And I'm listening to and I'm like, I take off my, we staying here all night.
Right.
We gotta fix this. This is a mess.
Oh.
This is a mess.
Wow.
If this shit comes out, your career is over. But there was a different version of it with the same beat. That was terrible.
Nas also fires off more warning shots with lines like, "I'm coming to collect the debt from the years that you owe me," making it sound like this battle was long overdue. When he says, "So what you capitalized only 'cause I allowed," he is basically claiming Jay only reached that level because the path was already opened. Then he adds, "I'm taking aim at your dome and reclaiming my throne," making it clear he saw himself as the one taking back his crown. The line, "Who said that? I'm still nasty," also connects directly to Jay-Z lyrics, serving as a reminder that Nas still had that same hunger from his early Nasty Nas days. It was also a way of answering critics who felt he never topped Illmatic. Naming the album Stillmatic itself felt like a statement, like he was saying, "I never lost it." A bold way to remind everyone of his legacy. Looking at the unreleased first verse compared to the final version, the official one feels more polished and focused. The album version leaned more into confident talk and clever insults, while the early version almost feels like raw thoughts put together before being fully shaped. Still, some of those original lines hit hard. Bars like the references to Jehovah, the blasphemy angle, calling Jay a protege trying to take over, and the teacher versus student comparisons all stand out as strong concepts. Lines like, "You always begging to be a part of my team, and I was the first to poison your speakers," really push that narrative of influence and rivalry. At the same time, it probably was a smart move to leave out some of the more personal insults from the early draft. Some of those lines might have distracted from the lyrical competition and turned attention away from the music itself. Moving into the leaked second verse, Nas keeps the pressure on. With lines like, "How you plan on facing a legend?" He is presenting himself as someone who does not need backup in lyrical battles. When he says, "Nas is a one-man invasion," he is basically saying he can handle any challengers by himself. This also contrasts with moments where Jay-Z had allies like Memphis Bleek throwing their own subtle shots, adding even more layers to an already complex rivalry. The message from Nas feels simple and direct. He believed he could stand alone and still win the war of words. In these lines, Nas is basically saying he was ready to take on the entire Rockefeller crew by himself.
You know, every time you go out there, you're putting your career on the line.
Would you ever do a King of New York album with Nas? Like how you and Ye did Watch the Throne?
Yeah, not probably, not at this point. You know, like, you know, if any other collaboration album would have to be with Kanye, because, you know, there's chemistry there and we already know how we work, and, you know, I don't really have the time to really like just figure out those situations and how a person works, and that's hard to do. It's hard to do, especially if you're gonna make something great.
That includes names like Beanie Siegel, Memphis Bleek, Freeway, Emil, and others connected to that circle. The message was simple and bold. He believed his pen alone was enough to go against a whole movement. Even Cameron, who also took a shot at Nas at one point, gets mentioned as part of that larger tension. Though that situation is a whole story on its own. Then Nas drops the line, "You hot, but you flop with your rock familiar, 'cause real recognize real and you're not familiar," which is clever wordplay, but maybe not the most devastating punch in the battle. Considering the commercial success Rockefeller was having, with multiple gold and platinum records, it is hard to say they were flopping. Jay-Z's sales may have dipped slightly after Volume 2. Hard knock life, but he was still putting up huge numbers. One line that really stands out from the unreleased version is, "Call yourself a gangster, but you were begging for pardon that night in Carbon when Terror Squad flipped on your squadron." That bar points to real-life stories being talked about in the streets at the time. Nas was referencing two different situations. One involved an incident at Club Carbon, where members connected to Rockefeller and Terror Squad reportedly got into a chaotic fight after tensions escalated. According to stories from that time, things got out of control fast and people had to leave the venue after the situation turned physical. The other reference points to an alleged confrontation involving Big Pun and Fat Joe, adding even more layers to the narrative Nas was building in his lyrics. These kinds of references showed how diss tracks back then often mixed music with real street stories, making every line feel loaded with meaning. There were even reports Jay-Z was supposed to perform at one of those venues for a large payment, but the situation prevented it from happening. All these details added extra weight to the bars Nas was putting together, turning rap lyrics into what felt like documented moments from a much bigger story. According to some versions of the story, Jay-Z showed up at the venue but left before things really got out of control. One of his artists, Sauce Money, had also dropped a track called Middle Finger You, which some listeners felt was aimed at Big Pun and Fat Joe. That only added more tension, and people connected to Terror Squad reportedly did not take that lightly at all. When it comes to what actually happened during the meeting between Jay-Z, Fat Joe, and Big Pun,
you know, I mean, the hardest thing ever was, you know, going through those R. Kelly albums, you know. It's just, you just never know how the situation's gonna turn out. It's an X factor that you can't even calculate in your mind that, you know, can happen at any moment, that you'd be like in the hotel ready to make an announcement. It's like, what? What just happened?
Tata, get the peppers.
There are a lot of different stories. Everybody seems to remember it their own way, and the details do not always match up. But one version lines up closely with what Nas was hinting at in Ether. In that version, there were disagreements about payment connected to a club appearance that did not happen as planned after the earlier fight caused problems. Some say there was frustration about money, others say it was about disrespect, and some say it was about the diss record from Sauce Money. No matter which version you hear, the common theme is that the situation got very tense. Across many of these stories, people agree the meeting became heated, with Jay reportedly feeling cornered during the argument. Some versions even describe him calling for help, while security could not immediately step in because of how the situation unfolded inside the room. Stories like these became part of hip-hop lore, especially once Nas referenced them in his lyrics. There were also claims about a weapon being involved, something that has been talked about for years. Fat Joe was once asked about those lyrics in an interview before Ether even dropped, and instead of directly denying everything, he reportedly said Jay should be the one to tell his side of the story. That response only added more mystery and debate to an already controversial moment. Fat Joe was never really invested in Nas's personal battle with Jay-Z. Reports say he was cool with Nas, but did not want extra problems with Rockefeller either. In fact, he reportedly smoothed things over with Jay-Z shortly before the final version of Ether officially dropped. By that point, Nas had already removed certain lines and reworked the track completely. When Ether finally came out, Fat Joe was reportedly surprised by what made the final cut. That makes it unclear whether he had any role in those earlier, more direct references being taken out. It could have been label pressure, or maybe Nas just did not want to stir up another separate conflict involving Fat Joe and Jay-Z. Also worth noting, Big Pun had already passed away by the time some of those lyrics were written, which may have also influenced the decision. Even though some fans think those removed bars would have made the diss even more explosive, sometimes less is more when it comes to keeping the focus on the main rivalry. Nas seemed locked in on keeping the spotlight on Jay rather than dragging more names into the situation. Going back to the second verse, Nas also references a famous Jay-Z line from Where I'm From, where Jay himself admitted Nas was among the best. Nas flips that idea to remind listeners of his status, while also leaving Jay off his own personal list of top MCs. On the official version of Ether, he does something similar by naming other respected rappers instead. There are also connections to older rivalries, including tensions between Jay-Z and Tupac back in the mid-90s, something many casual fans do not even realize happened. Nas even sampled Tupac's Friends in the intro of Stillmatic, which some see as a subtle nod to that history. The next few bars feel more like setup lines, with Nas basically saying he does not need gossip or secrets to win. With lines like "don't need to search for some dirt to expose you," he is claiming his lyrical skill alone is enough. And when he says, "I'm calling you, come out and play like warriors," it sounds like a direct challenge, turning the battle into a straight lyrical showdown. Honestly, it might have been the right move to leave some of those lines out. They did not really push the diss forward and felt more like basic rhyme fillers than real knockout punches. Compared to the sharper bars Nas used later, those parts just did not hit as hard. When Nas says, "study my blueprint, then piece together your formula," he is clearly taking a shot at Jay-Z by playing off his album title, The Blueprint. The meaning is simple but sharp. Nas is accusing Jay of studying his style and building his success from ideas that already existed. Interestingly, Nas actually sharpened this concept even more in the final version of the song, making the point hit harder. There is also a deeper reference here. Nas is hinting at KRS-One's album, Ghetto Music: The Blueprint of Hip Hop, suggesting Jay may have borrowed the title idea from that earlier project. Since Jay has spoken about respecting KRS-One, it would be hard to believe he did not know about such an important release. That makes the accusation feel less random and more like a calculated jab. Then Nas adds lines like, "Guess the knowledge I speak too deep to follow. That's why your stomach too weak to swallow the real truth," which is him saying his message is too real and too heavy for Jay to handle. It is another example of both artists trying to claim lyrical superiority during the battle. At the same time, there is a small contradiction if you compare this to the final version of Ether. On that version, Nas takes a more respectful tone by saying, "Who's the best? Pac, Nas, and Big. No best," showing humility and paying respect to Tupac and Biggie. That approach worked in his favor because it made him look grounded and respectful, while also reminding fans of Jay-Z's controversial comparisons to Biggie. That strategy helped Nas look like the underestimated underdog fighting back, while Jay sometimes came off as overly confident. But Nas also risked hurting his own image with some of the harsher lines from the early draft, like references to hidden secrets and personal attacks, which could have taken the focus away from the lyrical skill that made Ether so powerful in the first place. The phrase "skeletons in the closet" usually means someone is hiding something embarrassing or damaging from the public. In this case, Nas was basically saying there was nothing Jay-Z could expose that would weaken him. At the same time, there were already rumors floating around connected to the personal accusations Jay had made, which made this part of the battle feel especially tense. On the final version of Ether, Nas noticeably removed most of the direct references to Carmen. That was probably a smart and strategic move. By not repeating those claims, he avoided giving more attention to the personal drama Jay was trying to spotlight. Sometimes the strongest move in a rap battle is knowing what not to respond to. If Nas had focused too much on denying or explaining those accusations, it could have played right into Jay's strategy. Responding too directly might have made those claims feel bigger than the music itself. Instead, Nas kept most of his focus on lyrical skill and reputation, which helped him win respect from fans who cared more about bars than gossip. Rap battles, especially in that era, were often about image and confidence. Showing doubt or reacting emotionally could sometimes be seen as a weakness, fair or not. So staying composed and keeping the focus on skill was often the smarter play. At the same time, the situation showed how far things had escalated. Personal attacks, rumors, and shocking claims were all being used as weapons in the competition. That was part of the harsh reality of high-profile rap rivalries back then, where almost anything could become material for a diss track. Looking back, Nas choosing to redirect the focus back to music instead of personal back and forth probably helped Ether stay remembered more for its lyrical impact than for the off-track drama surrounding the feud. As you already know, there were really no rules in this battle. Anything could happen and nothing was off limits. Those are the two leaked verses people have been talking about for years. The third verse is still locked away somewhere, and honestly, it might stay that way for a long time. At one point, the whole original version got completely scrapped. Beat, vocals, everything thrown out like it never existed. Nas went back to the drawing board and started fresh with the beat his manager Steve Stout had given him months earlier. By that stage, Nas had already written 3 brand new verses, closer to what fans eventually heard on the final Ether. But surprisingly, Steve Stout reportedly told him the track still was not strong enough and even warned it could hurt his career if it dropped like that. That is a crazy thought considering how legendary the final version became. So they went back in one more time, cleaned it up, sharpened the lyrics, fixed the structure, and finally created the version that shook hip-hop and is still talked about today. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you like, subscribe, share this video, and drop a comment with your thoughts on this legendary rap battle. More deep dives coming soon, so stay locked in.